Hey guys, PIEGUYRULZ here, and I want to talk about one of my pet peeves. It's when people generalize what I say about one episode or one show and try to apply it to every show and then say they disagree with me on it. I know this is confusing, so let me give a specific example. In my review of Onion Gang, I mentioned how the episode only has Steven and Garbanzo, who can only say Garbanzo, speaking in it, and I noted this as a criticism. Several people thought that this was me saying that all stories with only one speaking role or zero speaking roles are just awful, and there is no way to do them correctly. That is not what I said, and that is not what I mean. Criticisms are a lot more complicated than a lot of people would guess. In fact, a criticism of one show might actually be a compliment of another, like an abrupt ending. Typically, abrupt endings are a criticism. Endings shouldn't feel like they just suddenly stop. There should be some downward action, there should be some closure to what happened, unless certain circumstances are met, in which case the abrupt ending serves to help the point of the episode. Like if the message is that sometimes you don't get closure in life and you just kind of have to accept that, having an episode where there really isn't any closure could further push that idea and be a good, fitting ending. But that's the thing about storytelling. There are rules, but each one of those rules can be broken. And if you're wondering, well, what's the point of having rules if they can all be broken? It's that the rules can only be broken if you intentionally mean to break them to service the story. This was something taught to me by my cinematography teacher back in college, and he used it to describe the 180-degree rule. It's a cinematography thing that's a little hard to explain in words. You can Google it if you're interested, but the basic gist is that you have to be careful which camera angles you use, because switching from one certain angle to another certain angle is incredibly jarring and doesn't really match up very well in editing. So, as a rule, you don't do that unless you want to intentionally show something being jarring. Like perhaps there's a certain turn in the conversation between two characters and you want to show that something has definitely changed in a big way. But I think this rule really does apply to anything in storytelling. For any criticism I have, any rule about it out there, there's always going to be exceptions. Having a poorly written, inconsistent character is bad, unless maybe the point is that they're satirizing poorly written characters. You typically don't want animation errors unless there's a joke in which Homer Simpson makes fun of animation. You would never kill off a character in an unceremonious and undignified way unless that's the point. Perhaps it was done for comedy, or perhaps the character really isn't dead and it's just a part of the mislead. And the reason I don't mention this in videos is because basically to go over every single little exception as I'm making my criticism would utterly derail everything. This is also closely related to what I said in my Critics Are Hypocritical argument video, in that a lot of shows have very different tones from each other. What is perfectly acceptable and funny to do in SpongeBob would come off as stupid and out of place in a show like Avatar: The Last Airbender. So basically, for every rule and every criticism, there will always be exceptions. But I think it's safe to assume that if I'm saying it as a criticism, it isn't one of those exceptions. Or at least that I don't think it is. Like, you very well can do stories where no character speaks or only one character speaks. But you do have to do certain things to make it work, like up the amount of motion that the characters have and do a lot more visual storytelling than you ordinarily would have had to do, which I don't think Onion Gang did. So that's my little spiel on rules and exceptions. Technically, yes, there are rules to storytelling. There are things that you are supposed to do and not do. But every single one of those rules can be broken. But only if breaking those rules is done in a very intentional and purposeful way and not just an accident based on poor writing. So with that, PIEGUYRULZ, out.